Welcome back, Tribe. We got one here. It's been a while. Jordan Peterson, also known as Peter Stein by some people. White boys are checking out of life. He got roasted on 20 atheists versus one Christian. That was not a good look for him. Let's see if he does better here at least.
I saw, hypothetically, an increased war on male play and interest preference.
This is where he shined too, by the way. Speaking about men's issues, men's rights, and the LGBTQ issues, language, and how important speech was and words mattered, and a man finding his purpose in life, how to attain happiness if possible, stuff like that. How to pull men out of depression. That's where he was shining. Then he went off on some weird religious thing.
That made itself manifest, I would say, with the hyperfeminization of the school system. And then as well, there was the communicated insistence that male ambition was toxic, that competitive games were bad, and that, to the degree that the patriarchy is a corrupt institution, that any sign of that demand for victory, let's say a competitive victory on the male front, was actually a sign of psychopathology. So I think part of the reason that the boys have been demoralized or are failing to participate is because they've been demoralized, and that's provided them also with an excuse to be irresponsible. Look, Nietzsche said, you're best punished for your virtues. So the conclusion is if you're going to be punished for being ambitious and goal-directed, then that's going to be very effective as a punishment, but it also gives you every reason to bow out and to be irresponsible. So I don't know what you think about that in combination with the things that you're seeing on the more specifically technological front.
Yeah. Well, so the boys' story is different from the girls' story, and it's a story of checking out of the real world. And I draw from this in part on Richard Reeves, whose wonderful book of Boys and Men. He points out that, boys and men used to dominate the economy and society in many ways. But beginning in the 70s, we get the transition away from physical work and longshoremen and strength and to a service economy. And we get, and girls are rising, which is great. But as girls are rising, boys are not rising too. In some ways, they're falling. And by 1980, I think it is, half of college students were female. Now it's 60% are female. So boys have been kind of checking out of school, checking out of the workplace. The electronic world, the online world's gotten better and better, more and more attractive for boys. They're spending more time on video games. So it is a story of male achievement, male motives being kind of hijacked or turned towards trivial, pointless pursuits that don't add up to anything. And so I would agree with you about the discouragement of male ego, ambition, desire to be great. The subversion of that into just wanting to do, higher up on a video game leaderboard, I suppose. But, I'd love to ask you, because I only really began turning to the boys' story about 3 or 4 years ago when I began working on the book. You've been talking to young men for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see when you look at the malaise among young men? I mean, part of it is what you just said about, but just what's your diagnosis about what's happening to young men? Is it depression, anxiety? Is it hopelessness? What do you see happening?
Well, a huge part of it's fractured demoralization. Like one of the things I've really noticed, it's quite the stunning and horrifying thing to see. I think the biggest impact what I've said on young men has been my drawing of a relationship between meaning, adventure, and responsibility. It's like, well, and you touch on this in your book, like one of the things you point out. So let me take a bit of a sideways route here. When the big five theorists were laying out the semantic webs associated with negative emotion, neuroticism, McCrae, in particular with the Neil big five, noticed that self-consciousness and neuroticism were so tightly associated semantically that they were indistinguishable. So here's the rule. This is the rule. And you allude to this. If you think about yourself, you are going to be anxious and miserable. Those are the same thing. And you know that when you're possessed by a bout of self-consciousness. It's not pleasant. Okay, so then you might say, well, what do you do about that? And one answer would be, well, don't focus on yourself. But you can't not focus on yourself. You have to focus on something else. Okay, so what do you focus on if you're male? Well, you focus on responsible service to the future and others. Well, why? Well, because that gives you what you described as that slow dopamine kick. It's like that's where, and that's not happiness, it's meaning. Those are very different things. Happiness is that like hedonistic kick that can be hijacked.
And that's the hijacking he's talking about. Because when you play video games, when you scroll social media and you watch these videos, highly edited, these shorts that are meant to hook you within 5 seconds for maximum retention, that's the cheap dopamine hit, the quote, happiness your brain feels. That's what you get hooked to. That's what you get trained on neurologically to chase, instead of the slow burning, let me make my life better day by day, step by step, slowly, so that I could enjoy a much better future. Like guys aren't motivated anymore by enjoying, the fruits of their labor later in life. They want to enjoy some adult entertainment right now, some degenerate OnlyFans model right now, some video games and some like ranked matches online right now, some anime show new release right now. And when you couple like, that instant hit versus, man, I need to go to the gym for hours, for days, for months, potentially years until I see the dream body I want. Man, I need to work really hard at teaching myself a skill that's going to make me some money one day. And I don't know if that's going to be 6 months from now or a year from now. Who knows? When you compare those two and weigh them, like that kid's done for. That man, his brain is fried. He wants the hit now. So instead of building a business, I'll just jack off. Instead of going chasing that girl, or going to the gym, getting a good body, I'll just play some Call of Duty with the boys. Whatever it is, shit like that. It's really hard when the reward system in your brain got completely jacked as a kid. Like tablet kids, iPad kids. You put that shit in front of them, you fuck them up. That's why they have temper tantrums. That's why they go wild when you take the screen away. They're like dependent, man. Not like a chemical dependency that a drug addict has, like needs crack to function and shit, needs heroin to make it through the day, or, meth. No, but they have an attention deficit, an addiction. They're dopamine dependent. And like it's insane to watch iPad kids throwing tantrums. And it's not just children. This shit follows them into adulthood. Like you take a grown man's tablet away or a woman's phone away and they completely flip out, dude. It's insane what this stuff does to our brain. We're going to, like in the future, this stuff's going to be looked at like how cigarettes were looked at when everybody and their mama was smoking, even when they were pregnant. And then the, health community was even saying like, doctor recommends a cigarette a day. Blah, blah, blah. You remember that shit? Like cigarettes are actually healthy for you. The industry was completely hijacked. Our industries are completely hijacked right now. Can you imagine what knowledge we have in the future of seeing how detrimental this is to a person's well-being, their longevity, their mental well-being long term? And what this might do to a young child's neurological pathways. Can you imagine that we're going to be looked at as like, dude, you guys were barbarians. This is the Wild West of the internet, of content, like social media. Shit like this will be regulated heavily. Like what's allowed to be shown to kids, which is there's no regulation. A kid could practically see any fucking thing they want. Bro, you open up a brand new YouTube account. You could say you're a child. Doesn't matter. You're going to get some chick shaking her ass. You go to Instagram. There's chicks that basically softcore corn on there, just released on their pages, linking direct to OnlyFans. Like this is wild. It's not just that society doesn't have a payoff. It does. The payoff is just too slow. And some men rather get it now, which is what video games, which is adult entertainment, which is like super degenerate shit like that gives them. They give them a payoff now for very little work. And the incentives are huge. Feel good now versus feel good later. It's fucked, dude. Everything is
jacked by the AI machines. Meaning is less intense, but more sustaining. Okay, so where do you find that? And that's simple. You find that in the adoption of maximal responsibility. That's burden, that's challenge, that's play if you do it right. That's also the sacrifice that civilization is founded on. And one of the things that we might know, Jonathan, is that the default man is useless. Right. So, for example, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I don't really care. So, in the Arab world, broadly speaking, the Arab world produces about as much as Spain. Okay. Well, why? Well, it's part of the reason is the men don't work. Now, that's not surprising. What's surprising is that any men ever work, because work is difficult and it requires sacrifice. And so the question is, and this is the anthropological question, the question of initiation: how do you socialize and civilize men? Because the default is going to be trivial hedonism. Of course it is, because it's easier. Of course it's going to be the default. The default's always what's simpler and more fragmented? Well, you tell them a story of heroic responsibility, and you draw, even more importantly, you draw a connection between responsibility and adventure. And so it's so interesting because so many men have reflected this back to me, and I literally mean thousands, because I've said, what you do is you look for the maximum burden, and you note that in service to that, you find meaning. And so you can do that with truth, you can do it with responsibility. And the young men will come up to me, and they do this daily, I would say, and say, 5 years ago, I decided I was going to start taking responsibility for myself and tell the truth. And like everything's changed in consequence, everything. And so what we're doing this bigotry of soft expectations with men. And one of the things I got right at the beginning was, see, the male attitude towards younger men isn't the feminine ethos of acceptance. So you could imagine the dynamic in a family is that this is a stereotype, but I'm going to go with it anyways. The mother says to the child, "You're lovely the way you are." And the father says, I kind of like you, but you could be a lot more. And those are good. Those are really good together, because when the child goes out from the mother, he's encouraged, let's say, by the masculine, go out. And then when he's exhausted, or she's exhausted for that matter, she can come back to the mother and be accepted. And that's the standard pattern of, security seeking and then exploration. Now, what I've been doing with young men is saying to them, you could be a lot more than you are. And it's an insult in a way because it means you're not good enough now, but it prioritizes the optimized future self. And that's actually hugely advantageous, And so I think what we're doing that's wrong with young men, and I think we're doing it to young women too in a more subtle manner, is not requiring or even demanding nearly enough. So they default to trivial hedonism, obviously.
Yeah, see, and look at the comments. If there's nothing to win for playing the game, then there's nothing to lose for quitting it. Why work hard when you don't get justly rewarded? We're treated like cattle. Women are more promiscuous than ever. The idea of creating a family is over. This has all been evilly orchestrated and blatantly obvious. Who are we fighting against? The wrath of built-up anger from men is bound to explode. It isn't. It isn't, because this right here, nothing to win, there's nothing to lose for quitting. Quitting is how they diffused that boil over from happening. There will be no built-up anger and wrath that explodes. Just men will quit. That's the point. That's what they want. Women and children are loved for who they are. Men are loved for what we can do. And now that society thinks we can't do anything, that women can do everything and do it better than men, we're not loved, but we're cast aside. Yeah, it's never been hard to be an average dude. If you're not earning like $10,000-$20,000 a month, you're basically a bum in society's eyes. Like having an average salary, I told you guys a year ago, is going to become the new hell. To be an average man will be a hellacious experience where your wages are being squeezed by inflation that never seems to stop. New wars on the horizon. Your politicians don't put your best interest at heart. They'll always prioritize women anyway. They have all the mental health care. They'll have they'll have the eye of society and cater to all their problems, while you as a man are, stiffen up your upper lip, figure it out. You're a man, bro. What are you complaining about? You're a man. Figure it out on your own. Nobody's coming to save you. That saying, like, you're a man, nobody's coming to save you, is extremely true. It's actually like the most factual thing in a modern society today. It's been that way for all of humanity, all of history. But what's new in today's society is that men don't actually have an outlet to be valuable to society anymore. Most of the physical things that an average man could do have been automated away. The need for a factory hand to assemble a car disappeared. Robots do that. Digging ditches and all that, we have machines. And it only takes one man with a big digger, and he can do the job of what used to be hundreds of men, nonstop working, shoveling shit, bucketing dirt out of the way. That day is gone. A lot of the menial physical tasks that required thousands of men has now been replaced by machines. And soon AI will just replace the other quarter of men that are left working in, cubicles, mid-level range corporate hires. That's all going to go away. Women will be most affected by that because basically society is just a giant daycare for women. Like, women don't really, for the most part, have real jobs. I saw Homath talk about that, and I was just laughing. And my wife was watching and laughing too. She's like, yeah, it's true. Like, most women don't do any real work in an office. It's just paper pushing and bullshitting. Like, those aren't essential jobs for a business to function, especially when you have AI automate the repetitive task. But the infrastructure critical work that we have that keeps society going, that's all dominated by men still. And we're going to have a weird society coming up in the future where men that don't have those critical skills, like if you're not in the trades, if you aren't an artisan of some sense where you can build things with your hand, right? Like here's something that men are doing. For example, I just talked about this in the private community. We have a guy that's an artisan and he uses gold gemstones and he makes jewelry and shit like that. And it's really nice, dude. It looks good. And he's getting better every single day. It's already really good quality stuff. There will come a day in the future really soon where if you don't know how to build stuff with your hands, you're fucked. We're already living in a what could you call it? Graduate college, get a job, work for 40 years, retire. That shit's dead. That shit's dead. We're in a gig economy already where you have to Uber Eats and drive people around and taxi them and shit on top of your real job to make ends meet. So now what people are doing is they're going back into artisanal stuff, back into the trades, back into, whatever it is that you're doing with your hands that requires a skill that you taught yourself, and then you film yourself doing it and you go viral on social media and then you make millions of dollars that way. Like you market your skill yourself directly. Yeah, I think there's going to be a bifurcation of society, mark my words, where businesses will only serve boutique luxury needs and everything else will collapse because we're already headed in that direction. Normal people can't afford anything anymore. The middle class is already squeezed. They're not spending money. Everything they go is just to make bills, make ends meet. But discretionary spending is completely dead. The lower class never had it, and the middle class discretionary spending has turned into, necessity to survive. So the only people with discretionary spending, if you're a business right now, or you're thinking of starting a business, should be tailored to the rich only. Because we're one economic downturn, an official one. We're in one right now, but imagine when they officially finally have the balls to tell us we're in a real recession, God forbid a depression, something happens with the bond markets, whatever it is, war, anything like that, and like Wall Street collapses, and then everything else goes. Like the real estate market is shaky. And there's so much that's going wrong with the economy. The jobs, like they tell us there's these many jobs available. That's not true. Unemployment rates are way higher than they're telling us. All of this stuff is affecting men. Guys are like, I already have insights into this happening because spoke with a dude who runs actively a construction company doing tier 1, tier 2 work. I can tell you right now, all other jobs dried up. People can't afford to do even basic remodeling or repairs in their houses anymore. Then have another guy that's in the trades, in school currently. Record number of applicants. They've had to cut applications. There are no more applications being accepted to trade school. The class numbers exploded from like 30 guys graduating to like you have 100 plus something people in there. That's insanity, guys. It's insane. The change is happening before our eyes, but you don't actually get to see it until one day they announce it on TV like, oh, fuck. Anyways, appreciate you guys for tuning in. That was Jordan Peterson, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves. Try to learn something with AI, something that you can market for yourself. We're on a 5 to 10 year timeline. I think that's all you have. 5 more years of GPT-10, GPT, whatever the fuck, Gemini 10 or Gemini Pro, whatever it is. 5 more years of iterations on this, it's over. You won't be able to tell what's real on video, what's AI. You won't be able to, it'll completely produce everything from videos like YouTube right here. It'll produce videos. It'll build businesses. It'll compete with other humans who also have AI powered agents, personal agents helping them. It's going to be much bigger than the invention of the internet. It completely and radically change the way we live our lives. You have about 10 years, if that. Good luck, everybody. See you on the next one.